The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.
Hello, Cherries fans, and welcome to this latest opposition preview show here on Up the Cherries in all departments. So, we got through to the next round of the FA Cup, of course, beating Wolves on penalties last weekend. Before that, we had two defeats in a row against Wolves and then at the Amex against Brighton. This week, we're on the road again, and we're going to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, by far the best stadium in the Premier League. Spurs have improved recently, but let's be fair, I'm sure Spurs fans will forgive me for this. It has been a season to forget. Now, before we do get stuck into this, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out more about them, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk, and also thanks to our secondary sponsors, Touchpoint Telecoms, for all your business telecoms needs across the whole of Somerset, Dorset, Berkshire, Wiltshire and beyond. Give Mark and the team a call there. Now, of course, Spurs, Ange, good man, but has struggled this season. We're going to find out a little bit more about what this year has been like for them. Of course, Dominic Solanke was injured in the last game against AZ Alkmaar in Holland, which, of course, might put him in doubt for this game. But we're going to ask a man who knows a lot more than what I do. So it is a pleasure to welcome on from the Park Lane podcast, Kallum Stubbs. Good to see you again, Kallum. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, no, I'm great, mate. It's been a while, hasn't it? And obviously it's a big game tomorrow, so
yes,
it's probably why you've dragged me on here and all that, so we can butt heads over it a little bit, like we did a couple of weeks back as well, mate.
Yeah, most definitely. One thing that I want to touch upon firstly is there has been this rumour ongoing with regards to Andoni Iraola, and Daniel Levy, supposedly, according to the press, quite wants him to take over at Spurs. Firstly, what are your thoughts on Ange, and what do you make of Iraola?
In terms of Ange, I've been very much... Last season, I was a big backer. This season, I've been more impartial and on the fence. I have called for time for him to move on. There has been resurgences where I thought, okay, maybe I can see something going on. But at the moment, it's very much a difficult situation. And Spurs seem to be going in peaks and troughs at the moment. We seem to have a good period and then we have a really dire period. So there's always a call for him to do it. And I read a really interesting one today where people were saying he's a manager, he's not coaching the team. I think that's fair. He's got a team of coaches around him who ultimately have to take responsibility. and a lot of them haven't won diddly squat. That's the
Yeah.
problem. So they're coaching a team to play a style where there's not much strength mentality in there. So there's definitely question marks, I think, over Ange's medium to long term future. I think in the short term, he's probably safe because we're coming to the last 3 months of the season now. I can't really see the board doing anything until the summer if they were to take a step forward with sort of either reassessing his position or even terminating him or fully backing him as well. So I think for the moment he's safe, but if a run of games goes how they did under Conte, Mourinho, people like that, if they drop out of a lot of competitions, then potentially he could be reviewed. But in terms of Iraola, I mean, from my own personal experience, I've been very impressed with him. I mean, obviously, is it his first full season in the Premier League, isn't it now?
Second now. This is the second season.
So obviously last year he got a lot of players sort of going and all that, and obviously some of them earned big moves, or well, probably hoped to make big moves. Like Dom Solanke probably thought, "Oh, great, I'm moving to Spurs, probably going to a top 6 club." I mean, when you look at it now, look at Bournemouth. You guys are way ahead of us in the charts as well. But Iraola got that effect where he got a lot of players who probably hadn't been doing a lot for you guys for a while going, and then he brought together a very balanced team of experience plus youth as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been thoroughly impressed with him with Kirkes, Hulson, Semenyo. He's got playing brilliantly. I mean, Cliver, I mean, that guy's bounced around so many places in Europe. He probably thought he was a basketball at one point, and now look at him. I mean, he looks sort of like how his dad did when he was playing. So, I mean, me and you probably aren't that old, but probably even our dads can remember seeing him
Yeah.
play and all that. And the way that his style, in terms of Iraola, does it, I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. And you found a way to play well against big teams, but also nullify small teams. So whereas the big teams, you can hit them on the counter attack, play very nice, and do the low blocks that you had done. You did it against Spurs earlier in the season and a number of other teams like Arsenal. Seeing him do it against other teams, sort of that, I would say, lower echelon Premier League clubs,
Yeah.
he's got the balance right, I think. Obviously, you haven't had win after win after win constantly. There have been games where over the last 2 seasons it's probably been lacking, but the fact that he's deployed a squad very well and dealt with players being out, I've been thoroughly impressed. And I think that if Daniel Levy was to look at a new manager to replace Ange, I would say Iraola's got to be up there with probably Thomas Frank, Xavi, and different names that have been touted in the press. And I definitely think he'd be at the front, well, probably towards the front of the queue because he's got Premier League experience now. And obviously everyone loved Gary O'Neill before he got sacked by you guys, didn't they? They thought he was very good. He seemed to do an okay job for you guys. He seemed to be quite a fan favourite. And then Iraola came out of nowhere, realistically, without much knowledge of the Premier League. And I don't think many people probably knew him either. And he's done very well. So no, I've been thoroughly impressed with him, mate. And I wouldn't put it past him to earn to the move to say the traditional top 6, as we put it. I know it would be sort of Liverpool, Arsenal, City, and Chelsea as that sort of bit, and then you've got the new clubs coming into it, or the expanded top 6 of like Spurs and probably one other club to go in there. But no, I think he's earned a lot of credit. So I'd probably explore the option. I wouldn't say it'd be guaranteed because we don't know what's in Daniel Levy's mind, but I like what I see with him, mate.
One thing that we've had, and one thing that Spurs has had, is a lot of injury problems. And one thing that is quite noticeable is that Iraola has managed those injuries a lot better than what Ange has. For example, Dango Ouattara was playing on the left wing. He moved him into a forward position because Evan Nilsson was injured, and it worked. In fact, Dango Ouattara is a better player in that advanced position than he probably is on the left wing. Whereas Ange has made a lot of noise about the injuries, but hasn't been able to cope. Is that a little bit unfair saying that maybe that Iraola has got it right, whereas Ange has got it completely and utterly wrong and can't deploy, because of his rigid system, players in alternative positions?
I think there's a merit to both arguments for it.
Hmm.
I mean, how many injuries did you guys have altogether?
We had about 8 at one point.
So we had 15.
Mm.
We had 15 injuries across our sort of lower to outer squad in terms of personnel. And when you lose your first team left back, both your first team starting centre backs, your first team goalkeeper,
Hmm.
your main centre back gets suspended, or your main centre mid gets suspended for an outspoken interview in the summer with
Hmm.
baseline racism, doesn't help. When your front man, who's come in to probably replace Harry Kane, gets injured as well. We lose James Maddison, our creative force in midfield. We don't have a backup left back. We lose both of our backup centre backs as well. We deploy an 18-year-old in the centre who's never played a centre back, who was a right back or a CDM. It is difficult, and I'm not going to poo-poo it. Both teams have had a shit show when it comes to injuries. And yeah, I would probably say that based on the personnel that were available, I think Iraola's done a very good job from it. My criticism with Ange was that before the injury crisis started, sort of October, November,
Hmm.
I think he could have utilised his squad better.
Hmm.
Now, Spurs went into this season with a quite a considerably smaller squad than what we should have done. We had 22 first team players. That included 4 goalkeepers.
Yeah.
And then the options outside of that were youngsters who, yes, were training and on the periphery of the first team, but sort of you can't class in your first sort of 22, 23.
Yeah.
And we lost a lot, even them youngsters, we lost a lot of them to injuries over the period. And we lost a number of goalkeepers during that time. We had Fraser Forster, who looked okay when he came in at times, but then by the end of it, people were going, this guy's no better than a bag of cement being in goal. So, I mean, it didn't really inspire confidence. So I think that the options that were available to Iraola were probably better because you did have Semenyo, didn't you? You still had
Yeah.
Cliver. You had, who was the player you said again, mate, that he
Uh,
deployed up front?
Evan Nilsson. Evan
Yeah,
Nilsson. Dango Ouattara then replaced him. Yeah.
that's the thing. Whereas we ended up at some points, our front line ended up being Son Heung-min, who has been run ragged, who
Hmm.
has not had any sort of form this season, who has showed he's lost a yard of pace. I mean, the geezer's nearly 34 now. I mean, everyone's seeing Salah do it on a daily basis and all that, and how good he's at his age. Son used to be ahead of Salah. Now I think Son has dropped considerably from that.
Hmm.
We then have other players like Brennan Johnson, a little bit of form, but nothing special. Kulusevski, a little bit of form, nothing special. So the options were limited. We were then left with Timo Werner, who, I mean, should never have been signed back in the summer. That was just a slot that I think Daniel Levy thought, oh, wait, he did okay since coming in last year. He's cheap. We'll get him in. And some of the most exciting players like Mikey Moore, Wilson Odobert, they got injured very early on in the season, and something that turned him from a small hamstring tweak turned into surgery, took 6 months to recover for Wilson Odobert. And Mikey Moore had a virus which put him out of action for 3 months as well. You don't really hear that. So I think that both teams have been hit worse than a lot in the Premier League, but I feel that Bournemouth just had that little bit of extra luck, I think, when it came to injuries, because a lot of your injuries were squad players, weren't they, as well at sometimes,
Yeah, yeah.
whereas ours were first teamers. And I think that's a demand of Ange's football, that the amount of players that went out with hamstring injuries, and tweaks to legs was ridiculous. And the demands of his football, the high intensity running, the pressing, constantly going, players are susceptible to do that. And I mean, when you think a lot of our players, 23, 24, 25, they should still have suitable hamstrings for it, but because they're asked to run 80, 90% of the games constantly, they just go. And if you look back, I think of all of them, probably only 2 or 3 were non-hamstring related injuries this season. It's been ridiculous, and I think that's got to come down to either Ange's style or the shit show of a medical team that we've got. And I mean, Spurs posted new jobs for medical team a couple of weeks ago on Indeed, and job seeking. So I mean, it doesn't really inspire confidence, does it at all, mate? But
No.
yeah, I think that Bournemouth have handled it better because of the players that got injured. Apart from Evan Nielsen and maybe 2 or 3 others, were not guaranteed first teamers for you guys. But then I think that your squad options that came in to replace the players that got injured, I think stepped up a lot better than Spurs' did as well.
Of course, when Senesi was injured, Dean Howson got his chance and took it with both hands in that reverse game at Dean Court, and scored that fantastic header. To be honest, on the subject of Ange, I really, really like the bloke. He is a bloke that do you know what? Whenever he talks with honesty. He will never throw his players under the bus. And I do feel a little bit sorry for him because, and I'll throw this at you, I don't think that the people recruiting these players are doing it the right way. Whereas Simon Francis and Pinto here seem to have these sort of young players in mind who can play multiple positions. Nobody knew that Dango Ouattara was going to be able to play up front like he did and be a real target man. Do you feel that the recruitment team with these players have let Ange down?
I feel there is definitely questions of the recruitment team, because I mean,
Mm,
don't get me wrong, since when Conte was there, we had Fabio Paratici, and
yeah,
he did a lot of good business. But obviously, there was flukes and flunks and wastes of money as well. So I mean, Pape Sarr, Udogi, they were both signed for a combined fee of about 30 million. They went on loan for a season, came in. So I thought very good acquisitions. There was then obviously the waste of money that Richarlison has been. I
yeah.
think, yeah, Premier League proven, okay, great. He's never really scored more than 14 goals across all competitions. So whoever saw that coming ripped our hand off. And when you think we was trying to get Anthony Gordon with Richarlison, I mean, look how Anthony Gordon is for Newcastle.
Mm,
Completely amazing player. Really,
yeah.
really good, barring the suspension he's on at the moment. In terms of sort of the players under Ange, we've brought in Mickey van der Ven, who is a very, very good player,
Hmm.
but he's susceptible to injuries. I think that players like Bergval, Gray have all stepped up quite well as players this year, but they've been forced into it. And I think if our first team had been sort of fully fit, I don't think they'd have been starting to emerge until around about now, whereas they've been thrust in 4 months ago and they haven't really got a chance to sort of go, you need a rest now. You got to do it. But there's players out there. Timo Werner. That's an opportunity when it comes to commercial deal to just
Yeah.
get someone cheap and easy and see how it goes. A fluke. Wilson Odobert, lot of potential. Haven't seen enough at the moment. Matthias Tell, someone who I haven't been impressed with since he came in January. And I know it's only been a month and 8 days since he came in, but he's not a striker. And Ange has said that he was going to come in and play with Solanke, most likely as a left winger. He didn't do much at Bayern. He was signed for big money back then. And realistically, I can't see him doing much as a front man. But last summer was a strange one because we lost about 8 or 9 first team players we sold, and they were either loaned or sold and they were moved on. So, I mean, Brian Hill left on a loan, but he was a fluke under Paratici. Emerson Royale, complete waste of money. And we probably got about 10 million for him in the end when we paid nearer to 30. Another fluke under Paratici. Højbjerg went. Very dependable team leader, but nothing more than that. He's on loan at the moment. And just in them 3 positions, we let a winger, a centre mid, and a right back go. And Jed Spence came back in, and obviously he has been a freak of nature at the moment. I think he's really impressed people compared to being a club signing a couple of years ago. There was a player there, but he had to mature. So I've been very impressed with him. But then he was on the last chance saloon, and he's had to actually take it this season. Whereas when you look, the players to come in to replace who left, Lucas Bergvall was signed last January, joined us last summer. Archie Gray came in for a very big price tag of 40 million, has been very good and very dependable, but he's only 18. You can't expect the world of him at this moment. So the only first team player that came in last summer was Dom Solanke. And
Yeah.
Dom's done very good for us. But Dom has been out injured first at the start of the season and has been out for nearly 3 months now as well, and has taken another whack in the Alkmaar game. So when you want to be challenging for a top finish, you need to have the balance of youth and first team players. And I feel that with what Bournemouth have done compared to Spurs, I think it's a lot better, to be honest, because you guys, like you said, Hulson came in, took his chance. I mean, apparently Spurs were looking at him while he was at Juventus, and somehow he slipped through the net. I mean, we're meant to have good links with Juventus. We bought Bentancur, Kulusevski, Romero, all from them, and he slipped through. Kirkes, very good left back for you guys as well. Probably going to go to Liverpool in the summer, isn't he? Potentially,
Yeah.
not that you're going to want him to, but I think he's done his 2 years. He's going to go for a big price tag. You got him for what, 5-6 million max?
Well, I think it was more 15 million that
Okay,
we bought him for, but the amount he's going to go for, to be honest, Callum, is ridiculous.
you'll make
And
100% markup, won't you? Easily if he goes even for 30 million.
100%. And I think it probably will be a bit more than that as well. But what Simon Francis and Pinto have done so well is they've been able to pick out these players. Like we've just signed an Argentine left back, Julio Sola
Hmm.
from Lanús, and I'd never heard of him before. So I knew or know a Argentine journalist, effectively the Clive Tilsey of Argentinian football, and I asked him about Julio Sola, and he said he's going to be better than Kirkes. Now, I can't imagine that at this point in time, but if he's 75% of the player that Kirkes is, he's there when Kirkes is obviously and it's going to happen. We're in that situation, to be honest, Callum, where if we don't make the Champions League, which is, let's be honest, a pipe dream for this football club, we are going to lose these players because they are going to go to Champions League clubs. There is no doubt about it. And I could see Kirkes, as much as he says on his own little YouTube channel that he's got, that, you know, he doesn't want to go to Liverpool. I think if the offer's there and the money's there and the agent's in his ear, of course he's going to. But it's those sort of signings, those backup signings, which we've done so well. We've done so well in that. But one thing I do want to throw at you as well is what Spurs' business is like. It takes me back to the 90s when Lord Alan Sugar, was in charge of Spurs, and he would make a marquee signing. You take Jurgen Klinsmann, you know, one of the best players I've seen play in the Premier League by far. But he did sign quite a few what you would call donkeys as well. You would call them donkeys. And it was like this marquee signing is there, but these other players just aren't up to, you know, I think donkeys is probably, you know, harsh thing to call them, but they're not up to the level that you'd expect from Spurs. And that's really, Spurs are a top six club. They've always been a top six club. But it seems to be, how much of a problem is Daniel Levy at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club?
I think that he's portrayed as a problem, and it's because a lot of the people inside Spurs are sort of mysteries. I would say they're kind of behind this veil sort of thing. And you know, the TV and media companies, they always zoom in on Daniel Levy whenever you're at a Spurs game. So it's usually him and his wife or him and his daughter. You then get maybe Donna Cullen, Rebecca Capelhorn, sort of the other board members. They're sort of dotted around. And there was a picture of them sitting on plastic chairs at Tamworth earlier in the season, and which didn't go down too well. But because of the way that it's portrayed and the way that Daniel's always sort of acted, it makes him seem like he's always involved in something. Whereas the way that it was put is that, and I saw an email that was sent by the internal media company or the media department of Spurs to a member on X, whether it's true or not. They asked a number of questions in terms of who's responsible for the commercial side, who's responsible for the international commercial, who's in charge of scouting, the actual procuring of players, the discussions of players. And the way that it was put was that Scott Munn is in charge of commercial and all the sort of business side of the business alongside Todd Klein. And it was then put down as Johan Langer and his scouting department, including Andy Scolding, Rob McKenzie. They're in charge of finding the players. Once the manager gives them the manager will say that he needs a player for this position in this profile. And it then gets built up and it then gets distributed to the scouting team, the agents, all of that out there. The scouting team will come up with a list of players, and Ange will sit down with them and go, right, I like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They usually have 5 players in that position that they'll look at and go, he's achievable, that's not achievable. He's a long-term prospect, he's a youth prospect but could make an impact now. And here's a player that is completely farcical, couldn't be there, probably playing for, like, just say if they wanted a 6 or an 8 or a 10 in the midfield, and Jude Bellingham's name came up on there, and they'd go, okay, completely unachievable, but maybe his brother Job, who's playing for Sunderland, is available on there. And once that happens, that they'll start scouting the players, they'll start looking at it, bringing the data reports back. Once that happens, that will then be put to Ange to say, look, these players are available. These are the ones. Can you please give us the go to say, yes, you'd like that player? That then gets handed back to Johan Lang to start negotiation, to start speaking with the other directors. And this is where Levy gets involved. it's the negotiation stage. It's when the money gets going.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people have issue with it, because obviously, apparently, according to agents, a lot of deals have fallen through. For example, Alex Scott went to Bournemouth over Spurs, even though Alex Scott's a born Spurs fan, isn't he? And we
Yeah.
didn't want to take a chance. There have been players that have been recommended to us by a legend of the club, David Pleat, as well.
Mm.
And I mean, Pleat, I've met on a number of occasions, and I think he is one of the nicest, most genuinely knowledgeable people of football, because he had that aspect to be able to look at all of the players in the younger category, but also the lower echelons of English football outside the Premier League, and find a gemstone. I mean, he found he found Dele Alli, he found Carl Walker, people like that, and he's had recognised success. But the way that football changed now, it means that obviously a lot of scouting's done abroad, like you guys do. And once Daniel Levy and Johan Lang sort of negotiate with the players and get them in a position, potentially, if it gets to that stage, Ange will then speak to the player and communicate with them to look at their profile, look at how they act over a Zoom or a FaceTime call, and he'll sort of get a gauge of them. And a lot of the time, that's a selling point to the player as well, because when
Yeah.
you hear it from Van der Ven, Madison, Vicario, all last year, they had a talk with Ange, which sold the project to them. And he's even said there have been other players that he's spoken to, and he said they are not the right personality for his team as well. And we know there's a lot of players that probably turn up at training grounds out of the blue at night when people aren't there. They go and speak to the club. They do tours of a number of grounds around the UK. If they're youth players, they're trying to get scholarship deals or trying to get sort of these. I mean, what is it? It's like over 18s can't come in, or under 18s can't come in because the new rulings of being out of Europe now and all that. There's so many players that are in the process of being looked at, and I feel that Spurs probably do it the same as all other clubs. It's just that because of the way that Daniel Levy always talks about the business side of it, and
Yeah.
because we see a lot of big players leave Spurs because we've either not done enough, we've always been one or two short. And ultimately, because Daniel Levy's the chairman, he's going to get targeted because he's been the continuous force throughout all of this. We've had Paul Mitchell leave as director of football. We've had Scott Munn. We've had Paratici. We've had what was his name? There was the guy that done the Magnificent Seven when Bow left as well. And Daniel Levy has stayed as a constant force for ENIC Group running Tottenham, and that's why I think Daniel Levy does get targeted. And I think that when he goes, eventually, when that will be, I don't know, but I feel that people will look back and think he was a very good businessman and he could do a deal. He's one of the best chairmen in terms of commercial side deals in the Premier League. But when it comes to transfer dealings, you always look and say, well, the scouting team have definitely let us down. The managers have either been let down or they've made the wrong decisions on players as well. They haven't been backed. They haven't been controlled properly. And by having that, Levy is ultimately just the one signing off the check at the end of it. But there's definitely question marks over it. And I think there's a culmination of things. And you can't just blame Levy. Spurs have been like this for so many years. Like you say, with Sugar, marquee signing and then donkeys and duds. Spurs have always bought in duds. I mean, the amount of times that I've probably seen a good transfer window that I've been ultimately completely happy with, it's not very often, to be honest, mate. And that's
No,
the
fair
problem.
enough. Fair enough. The one good thing with Daniel Levy, he has built what is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best stadium in the Premier League. He is a good businessman. It's just whether or not, a good businessman that keeps a club stable is what really the fans want when they're wanting trophies. And I know that our good friend Dan from the Toffee Blue cast, he's going to be going on about Everton's ground. Well, we've got the best ground in the country now, but let's be fair. What Spurs have built, is incredible, really, isn't it?
Well, it's all right. Dan's stadium's on the side of the river, so when it floods, it can flood their stadium. I mean, I will rub it so far in him, but no, I mean, it's a very good stadium, but
Mm,
I definitely think that the Spurs stadium has the sort of American angle to it. It's an entertainment arena. It's not just a football stadium. Whereas Bournemouth, I mean, it's probably because Bournemouth doesn't have the luxury of and the money to be able to cough up to build a new stadium, but it feels like a traditional stadium, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah.
when you had Real Madrid play there a couple of years ago as well in a pre-season, I mean, probably the Real Madrid players turned up thinking, "Fuck me, where are we? We in Grimsby or something like that." But it feels like that traditional old stadium. And I mean, how many fans can you sit? It's like 14,000 or 16,000.
11,000. 11,000. You've overdone it, Callum. So yeah,
Well, I
11.
was probably being nice, but
Yeah,
when you think about it,
yeah.
I mean, if you could do, and Bournemouth Stadium takes me back to the days at the Lane when
Hmm.
it was all a traditional old stadium. You'd have the shitty seats, you'd have the rough banners on the side and all that, but it felt like traditional football. But the way that
Yeah.
football's moving now, it's all commercial and event based. And the fact that we've got retractable pitches, we play NFL on it, we have rugby games, we have concerts on it as well, we have a go-kart track underneath the stadium, we have a cheese room, we have floating beer from the bottom of it as well. It's geared towards the commercial side of the club. It's not, and there was a message that was said when it was first going to come on that this stadium needs to have Champions League, and this stadium will get us forward as a club. And ultimately, it it hasn't sold its worth to us at the moment. Yes, the club are making money off of it, but the stadium has not paid dividends for what it's meant to do because at the moment we are so focused on doing the commercial side of the business. I feel that the club are lacking in people who know the football side of the business. And until that changes, the stadium will be great having Beyonce and Lady Gaga performing there and the Rolling Stones over the summer, and it will continue to make £1.2 million, God knows how, per match day on food and concession revenue. But until that side of the game is assessed, it will remain as an entertainment venue going forward.
Spurs have been after a trophy for years and years and years and years and years now. And back in 2015, it looked like he was going to get it, and then Leicester nipped you to it. Um, of course, there is one trophy that is still up for grabs for yourself, but you are behind in that game to AZ Alkmaar. Um, and you do have them following this match against Bournemouth. Is it possible that Ange is going to deprioritize this game? Because let's be fair, Spurs aren't going down. As much as Dan was joking about it a couple of weeks back. You're not going down, no way in a million years. But does Ange deprioritize this game, considering you want to get through the next round of the Europa League and see how far you can go? Because you can win it with the squad you've got. You can win something.
I think it would be very naive of him if he deprioritises any game now, because
Mm,
in the last 6 weeks, our season has fallen apart completely because
yeah.
we 1-0 up against Liverpool. We gave that up
Mm,
to get beaten 4-0 at Anfield. I know loads of teams get beaten by Liverpool, but we had the advantage and we should have played with our hearts, and that day we didn't. We then went out 4 days later to Aston Villa in the Cup where we didn't show up. Our Premier League season has been over for a considerable amount of time, but we could have still tried to climb the table and get as much better position as possible, in the realisation that some teams will drop points here and there that we need to take. We started doing that. We had a couple of good results on the bounce, and then we lose to City last week with a distasteful game where it was crying out for a striker and we couldn't do it. We then have a 10-day break and we played AZ on Thursday, which was one of the most disappointing and disheartening performances I've seen from a Spurs team in a long time. And these are all professional players who should, when they're wearing the badge, play for us.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, they've got to play their fucking hearts out, to be honest, mate. They should go against Bournemouth thinking that you guys are a rival to Champions League football, and we should treat you guys as a top 6 rival and play how they should. Because, like you say, our squad's more than capable. All of our players who have come back from injury need match minutes. So they've got to take these minutes and all that, because if not, the squad won't be used properly. So we should use tomorrow to beat you guys, get a run going, and beat AZ and kick them out, because it's 2 games at Spurs, which, if anything, it should be a fortress for us. Bournemouth should come to Spurs and feel scared. I don't think you guys do at the moment.
No.
I mean, the look on your face, it says it all. You don't look scared at all. Whereas every team, when that last season at the Lane, we turned that into a fortress. I think we conceded like 10 goals at home across 18 games. Now we've way outdone that. Teams come to Spurs for a day out. How's that meant to be? And all that. You come to Spurs for a day out, you have a drink, and then you get the points to go home with and all that. That's not how we should be as a club. And I think that to beat you guys, to then use it to go and kill Alkmaar is what we need to do. Because ultimately, as English clubs as well, we need to do well in the Champions League and in the Europa League and in the Conference League, because we need as many European places as possible to stop all the European clubs getting in there. We need these places, and that's how it should be.
And hopefully you will be AZ Alkmaar, because of course, if we do end up in the top 5, that could help us guarantee a Champions League spot, potentially. So, I think there's that added impetus. And also, of course, if you was to win the competition, then it does qualify you for, European football again. So there is that real impetus that you've got to do something. And, would you say that this season, if you was to do that, would be a success, or would you still see it as a failure, Callum?
I would say that if you said to me 6 months ago, if we could win the Europa League, I'd have bitten your arm off. But after seeing what has happened, I would still class this season as a failure, because there's an expectation of Spurs fans to not win stuff, but to compete. And I don't feel like we've done that at all this season. I think we've let a lot of people down. Ultimately, yeah, if we win the Europa League, great. We've ended a near on 17-year trophy drought since 2008. But I feel that for the squad we have and the players we have greatly let ourselves down. So I would say, yeah, great to win a cup, but ultimately we've probably shot ourselves in the foot a lot. And I think a lot of the stuff is down to our own misgivings as players, from the amount of points we've lost from winning positions in the Premier League. I think it's like 24 now. So if you add that to our total, we'd be in the top 2 or top 3. And then ultimately the club as well, leaving us short in the transfer window. I feel it's a multitude of things which have derailed our season. So, yeah, if it was me, I'd say that great success to win a cup, but an overall failure as a season, to be honest.
No, fair enough. And to be fair, just looking at some of the results as well throughout the season, of course, things have picked up a bit recently, but you got beat by Leicester on your own home pitch. You went to Ipswich, got beat there. And it's not what Spurs should be doing. Spurs should be winning those sort of games, and I completely agree. It's been a bit of a bad season, but hopefully Ange can turn it round. Not, of course, this weekend, but hopefully in the long run, mate. He can turn it round. What's the likelihood? Because I know that there's a possibility that we might see Dom Solanke, but what's the likelihood, do you reckon?
From what I've heard around the club at the moment, it's touch and go 50-50 because he did take a bad hit in the week. If I was to honestly say, I'd probably say that it's going to be a bench appearance, to be honest, for the same for Van der Ven and Romero. They have been in training for about 2 weeks, but they've been out for 3 to 5 months. Based on that level, I don't think it's fair to throw them in. But then, realistically, I'd rather Dom Solanke half fit than Matthias Tell up top, to be honest. So if there was a chance for him being available, I would probably take it and give him the chance against Bournemouth. He probably wants to show you guys how good a player he is and how you guys helped him so much. And I think there's going to be a lot of love from the Bournemouth fans for Dom tomorrow, isn't there, as well?
Oh, most definitely.
I think that as a player, and it's the same when Kane came back to us last summer when he came back with Bayern for the friendly, the love will be immense. And I think you guys gave Dom such a chance once he had the fouled stuff at Chelsea, at Liverpool. It took him time, but you guys persisted and persevered with him. And I think whenever he speaks about Bournemouth, in all the interviews he's done since he came to Spurs, it's always been very positive, which I think is great. So I think you guys you won't want him to score against you, but you'll want to see him at some point tomorrow and all that. So I think if he is available, it would be a really good opportunity for both sides to support him and really go with it.
Yeah, definitely. He's a model professional, Callum. So personally, I wish him all the very, very best. Really, really nice man, really down to earth. I don't know what all the manga stuff's all about and all that he gets into, but yeah, he's a top professional. Before I let you go, do give a shout out to your podcast as well, mate.
Yeah, no. Obviously, you can see myself, Luke, Dave, Winnie, Wes on Park Lane Podcast on a Sunday night at 7:00. We do our FIFA streams on Monday or Tuesday as well, and obviously, I am co-host with Harry on Scarfy Spurs Talks as well. So don't forget to like and subscribe, all of them. And if you want to bother to follow me, it's Kallum Stubbs 97 on X, and you can always bother me with all the useless crap that I do come out with on these podcasts, mate, as well.
FIFA streams. Do you know what? I have actually got FC 25, but I'm rubbish at it. So I might have to give you a game.
Mate, luckily you can play Luke, Kirk and Winnie because I'm a football manager man myself. I play
Fair
football
enough.
manager, so
Yeah.
you can have fun with them. But no, it's one of them. It's a little bit of fun for everyone. It appeals to a lot of our younger audience as well compared to the podcasts. So no, it's great fun for everyone. So we just try different things and see how it goes.
Yeah, definitely. And final question before I do let you go. Score prediction. I know I put everybody on the spot, Callum. So what do you reckon it's going to finish tomorrow?
I would hope it's going to be a 3-1 Spurs win.
3-1 Spurs win. There we go. Is that going with heart over head, or do you think that this is going to be, a turning point?
I mean, we tend to do well against Bournemouth at Spurs' stadium, to be
Yeah.
fair. So I think it's quite a realistic one,
Yeah.
depending on what team he puts out. But in past seasons, I would have said a 3-1 would be a very good result for us against you guys. I think we've even beat you 4-1 or 5-0 before there. So it's, I think I'm going heart and head on this one. Something has to improve, so I've got to go with it, mate.
Fair enough, mate. Fair enough. I'm going to go with a 1-1. I don't know if I'm totally confident because, of course, Ilya Zabania is still out. Marcos Senesi might be back in the starting lineup at the back. But I think Spurs have shown some improvement in the recent weeks. Take the AZ Alkmaar result out of the equation. Ange is up for manager of the month as well for February. So
last person who got Spurs manager of the month was Nuno, and he got sacked the next month. That'd go down well.
So yeah, I think this is going to be a tough game, and I'd be quite happy to escape with a point. But Kallum, thanks so much for coming on. All the very, very best for the podcast and for Spurs, of course, after Sunday, and no doubt we'll catch up very, very soon.
No, it's been a pleasure, mate. Thanks very much for having me.
Cheers, mate. And thank you for joining us. Hit the like, subscribe, the bell button below. It helps the channel to grow. Now, do go and check out the Park Lane podcast as well. The link is in the description below. Also, do check out all of our other shows. We've had lots of interviews with special guests on this channel, the likes of David Icke. We've had Richie Neville from Five. Of course, they have got a new tour coming up. We've had Richard Archer from Hard-Fi. We've had Gaz Whelan from the Happy Mondays, Adam Devlin from the Blue Tones, and many, many, many in between as well. Did I ever tell you I interviewed Brian Cox once? There you go. Can go and find it now. Until the next one, up the cherries. We'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us.
The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.